Welcome to ExoticCarHacks.com.
My name is Pejman Ghadami, founder and creator of the Car Conspiracy series, as well as the Exotic Car Secret series. For years, I actually introduced one of my, most unbelievable ebooks called How to Drive a Luxury Car for Free through one of my platforms called Secret Entourage. And on Secret Entourage, one of the main things was to help educate young people on the power of exotic cars and the reality behind exotic cars. Things such as maintenance costs, the beauty of being able to finance exotic cars, as well as the reality of the depreciation that occurs with a lot of exotic cars out there. And so for years, I introduced this through a very simple ebook called How to Drive a Luxury Car for Free, as well as How to Drive an Exotic Car and Get Paid. And for pretty much the last 15 years of my life, I've been driving everything from Lamborghinis, Ferraris, to R8s and anything else, and never really had a cost to it. I figured out a way and a principle on how to buy like dealers do, and how to convert by driving the car just enough at the right mileage, and then reselling it a year or so later and not taking a loss. So I was able to do that for several years before I realized that not only I didn't have to take a loss, but there were also opportunities where I actually could make a profit if I was willing to flip it earlier. So it came down to two things. Either I drove a car for free for a year, or I ended up actually driving a car like for a few months, 3 to 5 months, and then actually moving it within that time for a profit. So all of this knowledge, all of these things that happen, I started becoming really, really good at the idea of how to select the cars, how to understand the mileages, and how to know just the ins and outs of about every single exotic car model, luxury car model, and just specialty car, from M-Powers to AMGs, all the way up to Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and of course, Aston Martins and anything else that's exquisite, right? All of these cars have depreciation curves. All of these cars have basic maintenance and ownership costs. And all of these cars can actually be financed, believe it or not. There's just a certain way to look at each car based on the car itself, the book value, and everything that comes in between. I decided to kind of start Car Conspiracy because people kept asking me. They said they wanted more. They wanted more than just, something that was as simple as an ebook or a presentation on a whiteboard. They wanted actual live videos, and they also wanted an opportunity to have me help them pick the right cars. So years later, here we are, and I'm bringing
ExoticCarHacks.com.
What is
Exotic Car Hacks?
It's quite simple. It's a platform where you'll be able to watch a live video explaining to you how I've been able to, for the past decade, to buy, trade, profit from exotic cars. As well as it's going to show you how I've lost some money, just like every other investment out there. Buying and selling anything, there's always a risk of loss. And it's no different here.
Exotic Car
But
Hacks.
for the majority of the time, I've been able to win. And there's been certain strategies I've followed around negotiating, around financing, around buying, that have enabled me to actually position myself fairly well on every trade and position myself fairly well for the right sell at the right time. And I'm going to teach you all that,
Exotic Car Hacks,
which consists of our main product. Through our membership program, you'll be able to actually receive every month a total of 40 cars that'll be emailed to you. 10 exotic cars, 10 luxury cars, 10 SUVs, and 10 bargain cars. Each week you'll receive a list that will show you not only what's on the market currently that I believe would work with my program, but also you'll be able to actually receive my own insider trading dollar target price for each of those models. So for example, you'll be able to not only learn how to buy, trade, sell, and profit from cars, but you'll also be able to understand which cars I'm looking at each week, why I'm looking at them, and what you should be paying for them. Regardless that you're trying to save money on your next car, or that you're trying to get into an exotic that you didn't think previously was affordable, or that you want to start a side business to make some money,
Exotic Car Hacks.
it's going to be your one place, one-stop shop for all these things. Furthermore, we'll be introducing a resource center where you'll be able to access everything like warranty, gap coverage, tire protection, all of the things that dealers sell you and scam you out of thousands of dollars at the time you're making a purchase. And we're going to be able to sell you all these things at a fraction of the cost. And you'll learn through our program why you should never buy these things at the dealership. And you'll learn through our program how we've selected these specific ones at a fraction. When I say a fraction, I mean sometimes 10% of the cost the dealer has in it. Is what we're going to give you access to all of our resources so that you can save money. So I'm glad you're joining us.
ExoticCarHacks.com.
We hope you enjoy our program and continue to profit from our trades. And make sure to also join our community where you'll be able to interact with other people who within the community will also post their trades and post a lot about some of the deals they're finding and how they're negotiating them. So
Welcome to Exotic Car Hacks.
So like I said, what can you expect to learn? You're going to learn the ins and outs of the luxury car market. You're going to understand how supply and demand plays into everything. I'm going to teach you some tools on how to negotiate a deal. I'm going to teach you how to outsmart dealers. When I say outsmart, I'm more talking about playing games around their own games so that by the time you leave, you paid the least amount possible for your car. I'm going to teach you how to calculate the net cost of using your car and versus just storing it and selling it. I'm going to tell you where to buy the cars. I'm going to tell you how to actually buy them, how to actually inspect them. Do you know that, if something breaks down on a Mercedes AMG, you're talking at least $1,500 every time. Bentley brakes are $30,000. Lamborghini brake pads are $700. So we got to know how to inspect cars, and we most importantly got to know which models to buy. I mean, if you look at some of the earlier Lamborghinis, you're talking about 2004, 2006, they had e-gear issues, and I had friends that had $60,000 repair bills. So which models do we want to buy, what to look out for, what to stay away from, and then how to actually finance your car so you don't actually have to put out a lot of money out of pocket, or even lose. In most cases, you put nothing out of pocket. And then we're going to talk about how to sell and recoup profits. And ultimately, we're going to talk about how to continuously upgrade and trade without the costs. So long gone are the days where you took your car into the dealership to trade it in. You had bought it for $50,000, and then they were like, well, it's worth $10,000 because it has 80,000 miles on it. So, we're moving past that. I'm going to teach you all of these great things and more. With reward comes risk. So just the idea that this system is bulletproof is wrong. There's certain elements of due diligence you have to do, and there's a lot of elements of smart thinking and good judgment that go into play in this. So buying and selling cars can have its rewards, but if you do it wrong, it can also end up costing you. If market conditions change, there's always that risk, right? It's like a bad stock pick or a great stock pick where some unexpected news causes the market to drop. So keep in mind that the information provided is only a guide to help you on your journey, and by no means a guarantee of any sort. You're going to play at your own risk. But ultimately, let me say this. If you're intelligent and understand how this system works, this isn't like a bulletproof system that has a step-by-step for you where you're going to go buy X car that I tell you to buy at X time. Instead, with this particular system, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to understand the ins and outs of the industry, and then you're going to be able to take the ins and outs that you find out about, and you're going to be able to apply them to any which type of situation you're in specifically, because every situation is ultimately different. And so we're going to talk about all these things and much more coming up. All right, guys.
Welcome to Exotic Car Hacks.
As I promised in my previous video, we're going to go ahead and cover all the ins and outs of every car dealership, car deal process, and we're going to understand how to buy, sell, and drive exotic cars not only for free, but actually make a profit off of them. Now, they don't just have to be exotic.
Exotic Car Hacks.
Previous discussions, in my books and in my courses.
Exotic Car Hacks.
Cars in general. So we're primarily going to look at higher-end cars, which are going to be your higher-end models. However, they don't have to be exotic cars or very expensive cars put all together. So today we're going to start this video off with a case study. And with a case study of my latest acquisition, which is a very, very good car for this model. The reason it's a good car is because it's over 5 years old. At some point or another, it cost over $100,000. And it's a really good example of when applying the system, you can drive some of today's nicest car for the cheapest prices. And so I want to go ahead and walk you through this case study and have you understand how I've been able to purchase this 2005 SL55 AMG with 500 horsepower, and for the car enthusiast, 469 horsepower and 500 pound of torque. This is not a base model SL, this is the 55, which in 05 they only made the 55 and 65 as AMG models.
This is the top of the line 55. There's still a V12 model, which is a 65. But this particular car new was $127,000 with options. $127,000 for this car right here. And with roughly 35,000 miles, I was able to purchase this car for $29,500. Now, many of you would say, okay, so that kind of makes sense. It's a 10-year-old car. You're getting it for $30,000 instead of, you know, the full like value of the $130,000 that it once cost. But here's the reality. 30,000 miles on a car like this is almost no miles. It's almost like it's brand new for its age. Think about your normal cars, right? These are not exotic cars. They're driven by people. And now you have a 10-year-old car that was driven less than almost like 3,000 miles a year. That's like Ferrari type mileage on a really decent buy. So this particular car was really clean, which was why I paid $29,500. Typically on this particular car, if it wasn't as clean, I would have paid somewhere in the, I would say 23 to 25 range, simply because there would be a much better margin for profit. But it's very, very rare to find an SL55 in the condition as this one. And as you'll see from the video, you know, and as you'll see as we zoom through some of these different parts of this car, you'll see how clean it is and why it was such an amazing deal at $29,500. But let's look at how we make this particular car, which looks a lot better than a Honda Accord, which you could buy fully loaded at 29 grand, such a better bargain. You could drive a Honda Accord for $29,000. You would drive it around for about, like, let's say 3 years before you got bored of it or you decided you needed a new car. You would go from mileage roughly between 10,000 miles a year to 15,000 miles. So in 3 years, you would accumulate roughly about 40,000 miles in the car, the same amount of mileage this car has on it now. Now, in that time period, your $29,000 Honda Accord investment would roughly be worth somewhere in the ballpark of like $15,000. Now, so you've taken a complete loss of $15,000 throughout this whole time. And while your car payment may be lower because Honda offers all types of 0% financing and so on and so forth, your car payments could be equally low with this particular car because rates right now can easily be found at the 1.99 or 2.499 range, and at which point you're ultimately getting the same type of payment because, again, this is a luxury car, the Honda Accord isn't. You can go ahead and stretch this payment out over 72 months. And while you may think that, why would I want to stretch a payment 72 months? You're not going to keep the car 72 months. The interest rate is low enough. And ultimately, you're borrowing money for free, which we're going to walk in through all that. But so the goal is to get the smallest amount of payment possible that you can get away with the smallest possible interest rate so that the actual cost on the actual purchase itself is not greater than what you would have paid anyways if you were purchasing in cash. The main idea is to drive the car for as long as you can, and since you're not going to keep the loan, the interest is really going to be so little that it's not going to matter that much. So now, let's take a look at the actual comparison like we were talking about between the Honda Accord. There's a $15,000 loss on the Honda Accord, and on this car at $29,500, you could be driving it for the next, let's say, a year and a half, and roughly this car in a year and a half from now will still have a cash value of $25,000, assuming you keep the condition the same you bought it. You also go ahead and actually take care of it, maintain it, which is not that expensive. We'll go through maintenance of luxury cars as well, so you have a better understanding of how affordable these things are. But really, like the main loss on this car, assuming you put the same mileage as the Honda Accord in it, is going to be very, very little compared to the Honda Accord. So let's assume that you're not here to make a profit. Like this particular car for me was bought in a way because of its condition a little bit more expensive than what the market condition on this car is. It was done so because of the tremendous condition, the tremendous idea that the brake pads, and the tires, and things that do cost a little bit of money on these cars were already done, and the car was in immaculate condition, and you'll see shortly why. So now that I'm able to buy this car, even though it's a little bit above market, let's assume I was just going to drive this car and not doing it for a profit standpoint. I was still, in a year and a half, 2 years, if I got rid of this car, lose $5,000. $5,000, that is my worst cash loss I could possibly have on this particular vehicle, driving it for almost 2 years. Now break that $5,000 loss into 24 months worth of payments, right? It's pretty low now. Now you're looking at a much, much, much smaller. You're talking about roughly $2,500 a year. That's a little bit less than, that's about $200 a month in payments if you think about it. While you might be paying upfront $500, a month for the payment, you're still able to actually have a true cash loss of just $200 a month. That's not even including the idea that you could be owning a business that would write this off and get some money back from that write-off as well, bringing your payment under $100 a month to actually drive an SL55 AMG, which not only will do much more for you in terms of business, which will be a lot more pleasurable to drive than a Honda Accord, which will have a lot more power and fun, and in terms of your image and ultimately what you're looking to do if you love cars and the enthusiasm you get of being around cars, this now makes a $30,000 car that once cost $130,000 in brand new condition for less than a Volkswagen Jetta lease of $199 a month with $2,500 down. Think about that. Like, you're driving a $130,000 car that is immaculate in nature for less than the lease on a brand new Jetta, which has no options, cloth seats or like basic leatherette seats, and that's all you get with a stereo, right? So which one would you choose? Hardtop convertible, 130K at some point, that has the same brand image and everything else? Or would you go after the Volkswagen Jetta that they sell roughly 20,000 of every week? So think about this. The idea of the system is to teach you, first off, how this is going to happen. The second piece to the system is also to teach you a little bit more about the components, like the financing, the maintenance, and everything else you need, so you don't eat your ass and end up really losing tremendous amounts of money by buying these wrong cars. One mistake, we had a guy that bought an Aston Martin Vanquish, older one, really didn't follow the system through, decided he was going to go for it. Transmission fails, $60,000 in the hole. Terrible mistake. You know, that's why you need to stick to the rules of the system. You need to review them. You need to be part of them. You need to pay attention to some of the things I'm going to share later about maintenance and the way to go ahead and actually make these purchases, so you don't get emotionally connected to something you want and lose your ass on it. Now, with this SL55, remember, we went ahead and bought it for $29,500, right? And let's take the business equation out of it. We ultimately bought it for the same price as a Honda Accord. We bought a $130,000 hardtop convertible Mercedes. Now, we take that same car, we drive it along for 2 years, we get rid of it, and our total cash lost is $100 a month. Now, here's the really good part about this. With this particular car conspiracy system and the case studies you're going to see, you're going to understand how to make sure that the cars you're buying are able to sustain some awesome resale values in the upcoming years, in the upcoming months, or if you're doing it for a profit, in the upcoming days from the time you're purchasing it. You're going to understand the bottom out on some of these cars. You're going to understand the dealer networks you need to build. You're going to understand the maintenance people you need to have kind of like on call in case you need stuff. And more importantly, you're just going to understand some of the basic key components you need to ensure that every single deal you make is optimally what you want, so you can get the right thing out of it. But the one thing you're going to understand from this system that's going to be really, really exciting, even if you're not looking to make a profit, is that you're going to understand what true cost of ownership is. A lot of people misunderstand. They go through, you know, like their finances and they say, how much car can I afford? They usually think, okay, I'm going to have like a $500 a month payment. I can afford that, so that's great. And to me, having a Range Rover for $500 a month, that's affordable. That's usually how they think. And you instead, you're going to start thinking about this a little bit differently. You're going to start thinking about that $500 a month and how do you make that, how do you stretch that out, right? How do you get something like a supercharged late model Range Rover for that same money? And then how do you get that back? Because if you can get that back after you're done paying for it, right? Like you paid for it for a year and then you're like, yeah, I'm selling the car, I'm going to get my payments back, then your true cost of ownership is a lot less than the monthly payment. Because the monthly payment does not account maintenance, it does not account a ton of things. And so having like the true cost of ownership for something enables you to really understand what something costs for its true cash value and nothing more. So the goal here is to make sure you understand that cash is king, and that even if you're financing, understanding the true dollar loss or gain is the only thing that matters. It's not about smoke and mirrors. It's not about giving you like one element of it over the other, like make a payment, save on insurance, save on this. It's about giving you the overall big picture and how do you narrow it down to the true dollar it costs. So now, we're going to go ahead and cover the dealership process, how dealers make money, what you should know about dealerships, and also break down for you how to win every dealer transaction you have. All right, guys, so as we talked about so far, we looked at the SL55. We also took a look at a little bit more what the program offered. And today, what we're going to actually take a look at now is the dealership process. The dealership process is really important because obviously most car transactions take place in a dealership, and in most cases, like about 90% of the time, you'll find your best cars at the lowest prices in dealerships. And while most people believe that they'll find their best deals on the street ultimately, or through private sales or through auctions, the best deals you can find are at dealerships. And so understanding how dealers work is part of the equation, and probably one of the most important aspects of
ExoticCarHacks.com.
understanding how dealers make purchases, why they make such low purchases, also understanding how dealers make a sale, where they make their money in the F&I office, and also a little bit more about the servicing and the back-end way they increase their sales. All of these things are going to help you understand how you yourself as a person can behave like a dealer and ultimately make a lot of money using some of the concepts here to buy and sell cars, or to simply buy, hold, and enjoy your car. The goal of this video, just so you understand, is not to badmouth a dealer or to talk about how dealerships are built for profits and how they take a lot of money out of every single deal they can. It would be foolish for you to think that a dealership is on your side when you walk in, regardless of how friendly or nice the car dealer himself is. The idea of a dealership is a center where every aspect of an interaction with a customer turns into one form or another of sale. Even the servicing level is geared to provide more sales support for later. Most of these places have great service departments because they want you to make a purchase from them later. But believe it or not, the service department itself is one of the most profitable aspects of a dealership as well. There's two places where a dealership makes most of its money, and it's not in the car sales department. It's either in the finance and insurance office, which is the F&I office, or what we'll refer to it as the F&I office, or the second place where they'll make most of their money is in the service department. The service department is obviously where service advisors are trained to get the most out of you. And the F&I office is where finance directors are trained to cross-sell you and upsell you into products, regardless that you need them or not, that are controlled by your car or that are surround your car to either protect the bank's investment or whatever it is. They'll sell you things like gap insurance, protection plans for your car, protection plans for door dings, and dents, things that will protect your VIN number, low jack, tire protection, and just about anything else you want. All of these things have what we call core prices built in them, is the dealership buys these third-party services from other people that are associated with the dealership, that have their own companies, and sell them these on what we call a passive model at a fraction of the real cost of the product itself. So a dealership who sells you a service contract for $1,500 probably paid $600 for that same service contract they're selling you. So their profit margin is almost 200%. Service contract is actually the smallest profit margin the dealership has. Gap insurance, an example, could be as low as like $15 to $20 for an actual car dealer. That's what their true cost on it is, but they're selling it to you roughly at $900 to $1,000, depending on the car itself. So these are areas where, these are things that we're going to share in Car Conspiracy that are going to teach you a little bit more about how a dealership makes money and how these packages work all together. We're going to look at a dealership's VIP program, and if there's really good money in there, or if it's really all a scam and hoax. So we're going to look at all that. And then we're going to also break down like the process from the moment you enter a dealership to the moment you actually get out, and how you could be also capitalizing on making sure you don't get taken advantage of either. From the sales office all the way up to the time you get out of the dealership. So making sure that you can get in, take the car you want, not have any excess dollars associated with it, and then ultimately get out with the best possible price and the best lean price on the car that you've actually wanted to buy. So let's jump right into it. All right, so let's start with the dealership process and the part that is most common to everybody. Walking in the dealership, the psychology of a dealership, and very importantly, how the sales process in the dealership works, where the markups are for most dealers, and how they make their money in the sales office first. When you enter a dealership, every piece and component of a major retail franchise dealership is set up to be a psychological gain for the dealership, no different than a casino. A dealership is very, very intelligent in positioning itself to ensure that from the moment you walk in to the moment you walk out, you meet all of their objectives. Did you know that waiting at a dealership from the time you get to the sales office to the finance office is actually a trick? And in a lot of cases is not really because there's a lot of people in front of you? Or did you know that most of the products you purchase in the finance office are actually sold at over 200% profit for the dealership? Did you also know that a lot of times dealers will play tricks such as make you wait a long time or make you meet with their managers before leaving as an additional sales strategy to ensure that the salesperson did not lose or miss anything on their game? All of these basic components of a dealership are built to make you do one thing: buy a car. And so the intention for the sales office is to gauge what you can afford, how you can afford it, and generate as much information as possible before the actual sales process goes through after you've test driven the car and made a decision to purchase it. Questions that you're asked during the test drive about what do you do, what line of work are you in, how much money do you make, how much of a car were you looking for, why did you choose this car? All of these things help drive dealers to ultimately learning as much as they can about you so that they can put the right deal in front of you once they go to their manager and get the actual bottom line numbers. They know how you think, they know what line of work you're in, they're understanding that process really well, so their goal is ultimately to get you in and out, but through the best possible way for them to actually get you to buy the car and sign the dotted line, right? So the sales office role, as you enter, is to obviously, if you don't have someone, you're going to go to the receptionist. They're going to go ahead and get you into a salesperson. The salesperson is going to ask you what car you want. You're going to go through and actually write down, all your stuff. The first goal is for them to get a buyer's order form and get your information out. That you've now become a lead for the dealership. That's the first step. The first step is for you to become a lead for the dealership, and the second step is for that lead to become a sale. So once the lead is actually obtained by the dealership, then the next goal is to actually get you into the car that actually matters, because you're not a potential client. Once the salesman knows what you want, he'll take you on a test drive, he'll show you around, he'll ask you all of these questions we just talked about, so he learns a lot about you before taking you to the F&I office or to his manager for making the right deal on the car. A lot of times you'll hear things like, we've just reduced this car, this is a really nice car, like reinforcing your decision to pick that specific car. That's a dealer's job, is to just build confidence for you so that you're able to ultimately make that purchase without any doubt, without any buyer's remorse. Adding things like 3-day money-back guarantees and things like that are a dealer's way to saying you have nothing to lose if you make this purchase today. The intention of a dealer's test drive is to see if the intention for the dealer is to understand if you're ready to make a purchase today. Your intention is to understand what a dealer has in the car and how willing they are to sell that car today. And while most people just take the test drive trying to enjoy the car, I take those test drives understanding a lot about the dealership as much as the dealership wants to understand about me. Creating a perfect story prior to going into the dealership is key, because you'll need to stick to that story as you go on. The story needs to be that you're very interested in buying a car today, because the urgency is showing that you are willing to make a deal today if the deal is right. But also sharing a little bit about how you've seen competitor cars for much better value. So for the salesperson to understand that you're about to negotiate these values down. That's very, very, very important. So these are two things that need to be part of every story every time you walk into a dealership. Once you actually get into the dealership, and once you actually are through the test drive, you're going to come back to the desk, and the sales office, again, is there to kind of present to you the car with auxiliary products or whatever else they want. But the goal is to get you to make a purchase today, regardless if it's the car and additional products or not. So he'll come back, he'll say, I've talked to my manager, we've lowered the car a little bit. They'll usually give you $500 to $1,000 off the price. That price is usually what they'll tell you, this is a great price, this is what's good, and so on and so forth. So in this particular cases, the best possible scenario is not to argue and negotiate at every aspect. The goal of this dealership, remember, is to get you to buy a car, and you want to buy a car, but you want to buy it at the right price. So the goal in the dealership is not, under any circumstance, to just get pissed and take it personally, but it's rather to strategically play your game from the very beginning to the very end, the same way the dealer plays it. So understand two things. The dealer will make most of its profit at the F&I office. So it is willing to give you a lower price usually on the front end because it knows it'll make some on the back end, especially if you want to finance a car or buy additional products. Stating your intention to buy such intentional products or stating your intention to finance the car is going to help you lower the price at the sales office before you get to the F&I office. Being willing to put in a buyer's order as well as an actual finance sheet. So pulling your credit is also important, even if you have your own financing, because the dealer at that point does not know you have your own financing. So the best thing to do, even if you tell him, is to show him that you qualify and that you're willing to walk out of there with a car today, even if you're offering your own financing, or even if you're not approved by your own bank. They already have you approved, so they know you'll walk out with a car today. This intention to buy urgently is ultimately what you need to create at the sales office. And that's the only thing you need to create at the sales office, is to show that you're ready and that you are prepared to make a purchase today. That's the core of the sales office. And a lot of people confuse the sales office with the final F&I office. The business manager in the F&I office, as well as the general manager of the dealership, don't have a lot of way at the sales office. They kind of structure the deal. And then from there, the business manager and the general manager have a much closer communication ratio at the finance office. So remember that your main goal is to only show your immediate necessity to buy the car, and also drive the price as further as you can down with the belief that you're going to finance it and buy auxiliary products at that time as well. Because the deal will factor in the complete deal, even though you're factoring in the purchase car price as itself. The one thing to be very cautious of in the sales office is, obviously car dealers are trained to know their inventory and everything around. So don't throw out stupid numbers about things that don't exist or are not true. Instead, focus only on things that are true. If you've seen other cars on Auto Trader, point them out. The part where you can lie is that you've actually gone and checked out those cars and they were very clean. But the part about the cars being there can't be a lie. They have tools to know what's on the market at any given time. So if you're telling them you've seen cars much lower and there's none within a 600-mile radius on Auto Trader, eBay, or anywhere else, then they know you're lying. So be careful about positioning yourself with actual facts rather than just trying to throw fake numbers out to get a lower price. Instead, throw factual evidence about other cars on the market, except they don't have to know if you've actually seen those cars or not. I often said that I've actually seen 2 to 3 of those cars, and I point out which ones on Auto Trader and how much cheaper they are than the ones they're selling. And I tell them that these cars are in immaculate condition despite having a few things that were wrong that can be fixed for much less, making them better deals than they have. However, I prefer their car, and I still show authority in the idea that I would make a purchase on their car today if they were willing to work out a better deal. Maybe not as low as some of these other wholesale deals, but something reasonable in between. The goal is to understand that the dealership has to make money, and therefore will only sell you a car if they're making a profit, not just to break even, unless they're trying to get rid of the car and they want it to go to auction anyways, at which point they don't want to pay the fees. So understand that part is really, really important. If you're buying a car from a dealer has to make money, you have to save money. The goal is for everybody to win. So don't think of it as you're going to beat the dealer at their game. Think of it as you're going to get a fair price out of the game. So that's the main concept behind the sales office. All right, so the first step after you've negotiated your finance price down is to go to the business office and actually get an actual finance manager to work with you. The F&I office is, like I said, where most dealerships with the service department make their most money. Therefore, each office of the F&I operates separately from the dealership, and so does the service department. Even though they work together, they still work separately. So don't expect a salesperson to be able to tell you they'll fix your car for free, because they don't have that authority to. That said, with the F&I office, there's 3 areas where people make a lot of money. The first one dealerships make money on is the financing. 99% of dealers make at least 1 point on your financing, meaning that if they're selling your rate at 4.9%, that bank is buying that rate at 3.9%, meaning they are getting paid 1% of the cash price on the car by the bank for doing that deal. Now, you have to retain that loan for 6 months for them to actually get paid that dollar. Nonetheless, it's still very, very important that you understand that usually you're a point off from whatever you're sold. Most dealers attempt to pay 2 points over, but the average dealer will land anywhere from half a point to 1.5 points. It really depends on how well. Most dealers, most large franchise dealers, are not even able to make a financing deal unless you accept 1 point over the finance price they're buying the loan for. So ultimately, the dealer makes most of its money in the F&I office from the financing, because almost everybody finances a car. Then the second part of it is they make their secondary largest amount of profit through these service contracts. Service contracts, even if they're good, are usually sold at about 50% of their face value. So dealer buys them at 50% of what they're selling them to you for. Believe it or not, you can negotiate that price down. So don't hesitate to actually do that. If you actually want a service contract, first make sure it's the right service contract, and then 2, make sure you're actually getting it for the right price. Don't fall into the scam of paying full value for the service contract, and do your homework about the service contract itself. Don't buy it right then and there. They'll gladly sell you one after, even though they're telling you they can't. They usually hold your paperwork for 3 days, so you can usually call and actually get them to add it to your contract and re-sign it if you really go home and investigate it. Don't make that purchase at the F&I office that moment unless you can negotiate way down and you know the service contract's the one you want. The third place where they make most of their money is Gap. Gap is also something they sell you to cover you between the difference your insurance will pay out and the difference of your loan. So if your car is worth has a cash value of $70,000, but you're buying it for $85,000, you're $15,000 in deficit, which they're telling your insurance won't pay. Most of your insurances will pay, unless you have really dumb or ghetto insurance or something really cheap. Then they'll try to use cash value. In most cases, if you're using our system, you're buying at cash value prices, so you're not really in a bad Gap deficit. Now, there's a few things to remember. Most of your Gap and service insurance service contracts, even if you buy them, have cash value, so make sure they do. You can buy them if you feel like you need peace of mind, and then you can make sure that if you do sell your car, you return them. Most people forget. You can actually get a lot of your money back, especially if you haven't used it. So you're buying it for peace of mind. You never end up using it. Call them when you sell the car, get the prorated refund back. In most cases, if you never used it, they only give you a prorated refund based on time or mileage, which is phenomenal. You actually get a major portion of that back. So it sometimes is worth it to pick up the Gap and service contract as long as you know they're the right ones and they're going to be useful and they have a cash value. There's other products at the F&I office they sell you, most of which are sold at a core price and then resold to you at some other price. They'll sell you things like LoJack for your car at like $500 for lifetime or $80 a month, whatever, and they're paying roughly $10, $15 for that product, and they're selling it to you at a significantly more expensive margin. So the F&I director's job that's in that office is to kind of move you through that process as fast as he can and sell you some of these through a menu or through other things he has. His goal is to sell you at least 3 to 4 products as fast as possible so that they can make the most margin. Your goal at the beginning of going to the F&I office is to state your intention to do so, but by the time you get to the F&I office is to show your inability to afford it. So don't be afraid to say, I cannot afford this car because of these things, and I cannot afford this car because of the dollar amount of the financing, driving the prices down. Once you go in and you look like you're willing to accept a 6% rate, you go in, then you let them know that you're not willing to accept the payment because you can't afford it. Bringing up the idea that you can afford it brings up kind of the idea that you're not willing to make that decision today. So now that the F&I director's there, he has a lot more pull and he has a lot less time because he has to close more deals. So now is a really good time to start wasting his time because he's going to want to get you out of there as fast as possible. So he's going to go to the general manager and get as much as he can. I usually get 30 to 40% off further of the actual value difference between a car, the value the dealer bought a car to the value selling the car. I'll get a larger margin off of that value at the F&I office because I make a better team with the F&I manager where I'm able to understand how he makes his money, and I'll tell him I'll keep the loan 6 months so he'll make his money, and I'm always true to my word. So knowing the system enables you to have good discussions with the F&I manager and lower the price of the car itself. The goal is not to get the cheapest monthly payment. The goal, remember, is to get the cheapest cash price for the car. Because when you go and sell the car, even if you're financing it, that finance amount doesn't change. Even if your payment was higher because of interest, that's not going to change how much of that finance amount is actually the purchase on the car itself. So just remember that as you walk in the F&I office, because you could walk out with a big debt or you could walk out with a big asset. So we talked a little bit about how dealers make money in the sales office and the F&I office. But ultimately, we also said that dealers need to make money no matter what. And that's the key part you need to understand. Dealers need to make a profit off of every car they have. With used cars, there's larger profit margins than with new cars. But remember, here's how dealers make money, just so you understand. Outside of the F&I office, which we talked about, where they sell you products, they sell you financing, and so on and so forth. Let's talk about how dealers make money on the cars. The average dealer in the United States makes roughly $1,500 on a new car. Now, that doesn't mean that they're making $1,500 from you. They could sell you a car at what they call invoice, and they would still make money because of manufacturer kickbacks for selling X amount of cars. Franchise dealers want to sell volume, and they get money back from manufacturers for selling volume. So they don't want to tell you that. They'll never tell you that. They'll never admit to it. But that's the whole goal here, is for you to know that manufacturers pay dealers for selling a certain volume of their cars. The whole goal here for a dealer is to sell as many new cars as they can, as many used cars as they can. When they sell new cars, they get money from financing from the manufacturer. They get money from the car sale itself, from accessory sales, and so on and so forth. The average cut on a new car is $1,500. The average cut on a used car is $3,000, which is why dealers love selling used cars. The margins usually on exotic cars are over 10 to 15,000 in certain cases, and then they narrow it down that if they can make 5 on a car, they're happy. They usually use their values based on what's on the market. So you have a better chance of negotiating a car lower if there's less cars on the market or the prices on such cars are lower in general on the market. The dealer will want to make at least 2 to 3 grand on a used car, and that's okay because you have to think it's relative to what you're doing. If you're buying a $150,000 car, $3,000 is 0.5%. It's not that big of a deal, right? So the whole goal, I'm sorry, it's 2%, but the whole goal is for you to be able to make, to get that margin as low as possible. So from 10,000 in profit to like 2,000, 3,000. And when you know that bottom number, which is the auction number that the dealer could have bought this car for, then you also know the other side, which is what you want to buy this car for and how much the dealer needs to make on top of it. The dealer will always tell you you're getting the best deal possible, it's the cheapest margin, they can't afford to make that deal, and blah, 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 blah. That's their job, is to psychologically trick you into thinking you're getting the best possible deal, to make you think it's reduced already. Well, all they're reducing in the margin that was already way overboard anyways. A lot of exotic cars are listed at like 150, but they sell at like 110. A lot of people don't know that. Some idiots actually pay 140 for that car. Don't be that guy. Like, you have to be able to know what these margins are and then narrow them down as much as possible. The more expensive the car, the larger the margin. Focus on getting the margin down. Even if it's on a Honda Accord or a Maxima, focus on getting the margins down. Understand what you're buying, understand the options like we talked about earlier, and then understand exactly how to go ahead and walk into a dealership or into a private party and get that margin down as little as you can and as close as you can to the cash price of the vehicle. You see, that margin is ultimately what you're playing on to get money yourself. So if you're buying a car that's at a $15,000 margin for $2,000, you now have a $13,000 margin to play on when you try to resell that car yourself, because someone else won't know what you know because of this video. So they'll pay the additional $5,000, $6,000 over that margin, right? That's why the dealer had it so high. If you're trying to flip a car, that's where you make your money, is in the additional margin. If you're not trying to flip a car and you're trying to drive it, that margin is how long you can drive it before you lose your cash value. So like today's lowest cash value is tomorrow's retail value a year later when you go sell the car. So that profit margin, again, is making that margin smaller so that you lose less money when you sell a car you put a lot of miles on. This is how I drove an Audi R8. I literally drove that car for a year. I put about, like 12,000 miles on an R8, which was a lot. I bought it with like 8,000 miles, but got it up to 20,000 and sold it for $6,000 more than I bought it. Now, most people wouldn't be able to do that. They'd buy a car, they'd let it depreciate, they'd lose money on it. But I'm able to drive the latest model R8, get all the praise in the world, and still make tremendously good money on the car when getting rid of it. Now, the goal with that car was never to make money on it because I didn't flip it and I put a lot of miles on it. The goal for me was to drive that car and not lose a dime on it. And I didn't, and I actually made money off of it. So including the taxes and so on and so forth. So the whole goal for you is to be able to get that margin as low as you can, and that car was listed for 102. We walked out of the dealership at 87, plus like a service contract that was 89. So long story short, at 89K with a service contract cash value, I have 87K in the car, and then I have this 102 price. That margin is not eaten by $15,000 that the dealer did not make. Now, the whole goal of these is to understand that R8s obviously are not selling for $95,000 at the auction, even though dealers want you to believe that. So just keep that in mind, and as we go through this video, this will make more and more sense for you, but I wanted to give you a good taste of what dealerships ultimately do to make money off of you. Okay guys, today we're going to take a look at depreciation. Depreciation is the center of what every single car goes through the minute it gets off the lot. I'm sure you've heard the saying, when a car leaves a new car lot, it's automatically worth 30% less. You automatically lost 10 grand. Whatever they're saying, it's absolutely true. You're going to lose money the minute you take the car off the lot. But did you ever wonder why, if the car is brand new, even though you've driven it, but if you've barely driven it, why does it matter and why does it lose so much money right off the top? So I'm going to walk you through understanding how the new car market works and how used cars become such a great bargain and why they become such a great bargain. So first off, understand that every new car comes out of a manufacturer with 3 different things. First, a manufacturer invoice, which is the invoice at which the manufacturer's true cost of creating that car is.
then a dealer invoice, which is what supposedly the dealer is willing to sell the car over in order to get a kickback from the manufacturer, and then of course your MSRP, which is your manufacturer suggested retail price. Those three things are the core things that you'll see or you'll hear a dealer talk about. Now, they'll never talk about the manufacturer invoice because they don't want you to know about that one. The ones they'll tell you about is buy 1,000 over invoice and so on. So you actually believe that you're buying for 1,000 more than what they paid. When in reality, what you're really buying is you're buying not only 1,000 more into their profit, plus the profit they have between the manufacturer invoice and the actual dealer invoice. So understand that all of these things are complete bullshit and that they have really no relevance to the reality of what you can buy cars for. When you buy a car new, when let's say, let's use an exotic car because I'm just an exotic car nut. When you use, let's say, a Ferrari 458, right? Oh no, that's a bad example. Ferrari doesn't really do rebates. Let's use the Corvette. Actually, that's a good example. You want a Corvette Stingray, and they sell for roughly 60, 70 grand, you know, fully loaded. So you walk into the showroom, you buy that car. The minute you walk out the lot, it's worth 50K. Why? Here's what happens. 2014, GM introduces this car. End of 2014, GM can't sell all the remaining cars. GM starts discounting the cars, 10 grand to move them out. So now your car right off the bat is used, right? But they're selling a new one for 10K less than you paid. So right then and there, you just lost 10 grand because someone can walk in a dealership, buy a brand new one, 10K less than what you paid. So that's why the first appreciation hit happens on your car. Dealer rebates suck, and dealers willing to move cars because end of year inventory come out suck. When new car models come out, then obviously the last year model goes down. Why? Because the warranty is shortening, as well as the fact that the car actually has new features the following year. As small as these features may be, they do make a car impact. So imagine in 2015, the Corvette comes with more colors, more options, or has now the option to have ceramic brakes. These things now devalue the 2014s because the 2014s now have 1 year warranty off of them and also don't offer these options. So someone can now walk in 2014 to buy a 2015 model and is now able to buy a better car than yours at the same price you paid for yours. So you again lose money on the appreciation for the 2014 models. Let's go one more step after that. Not only the dealer offers incentives like such as rebates, but the dealer offers 0% financing on cars they can't move. What does that mean? Someone can now get in a car that you bought for X amount of money for less money per month. Most shoppers are finance or lease shoppers, so therefore most shoppers care that the dealer offers 0%. Once again, an additional incentive to pay a few thousand more to buy from the dealer instead of you. So again, one more thing that just impacts your car. The final things, the two final things that really crush the car market and that crush your car for having bought it is lease returns. Every car can be leased, and a lot of times you'd be surprised. I think in California, like 60% of the cars are leased. So imagine if you buy this brand new BMW and you drive it and you're leasing it, so 2 years later you return it, or 3 years later you return it. The biggest leases are 24 and 36 months. Those 2 points are the 2 main points where car dealers get an influx of cars coming back into the market and have a huge inventory. What happens when there's a lot of inventory, there's very little demand, prices go to complete shit. So your exact car that you bought is now worth less because more people were leasing it and are not trading it back in, giving it an influx of supply and the lack of demand because it's no longer a new hot car on the market. It's not 3 years old, so it's pretty widespread out there. So you have all of these things, you know, that are impacting you. And the final thing that completely crushes the price of your car is the warranty. Most manufacturers give you 3 years, luxury ones give you 4, exotic ones give you 2 to 3. But at the end of the day, when a car goes out of warranty, people know, and when I say warranty, I mean the original warranty, like the official original, not the certified pre-owned. The car starts completely tanking because nobody wants to take on, you know, BMW or Mercedes repairs out of their pocket. And as you'll find out in one of our case studies, you know, I've spent maybe $5,000 my cost at wholesale trying to fix a car that cost new 180. I bought it for 60, you know, and I've spent $5 grand trying to bring it back to the right place, but it continues to have issues. That said, you know, I'm taking these 5K cash losses that a lot of people can't afford to take. In my case, it's different, but the average buyer can't afford to start investing $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month repairing a car. So they'd rather buy a new car, they'd rather buy a crappier car that doesn't have options, and therefore they'll get ripped and they'll lose all their money. They don't realize they'll lose a lot more than $5,000, $6,000 grand over the course of a lease, but they have the peace of mind because they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they don't understand the idea of actually making money or really realizing the value of real money. So what they do is they waste their time just looking at what they're making a month and what they can afford to spend. But that is the reality of what's out there, and that is how you'll have to learn how to position your sales in the future as well. So for now, I just wanted you to understand the main things that cause the depreciation that occurs on your particular car when it's new and going to use. Now, what we're going to learn here is how to actually pick up, and I'm going to walk you through a chart on how you're going to actually pick up the car right between that time, between the first lease term, which comes due at the 24 to the 36 month, and the time the warranty runs out right at the 4-year mark. So you're going to buy the car right with some warranty left, you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to sell it before the warranty runs out as well, or you're going to buy it right when it has warranty enough, but not enough left for the price to go up when you buy it, and you're going to be able to sell it to the right person, making sure it's all fixed and perfect due to the warranty outages. So, make sure to keep watching, as we'll cover the depreciation graphs of a Lamborghini LP550, and we'll understand a lot about how cars in general depreciate and how leases really impact the depreciation curve and when the right time is for you to buy.
Yeah, missing data. Obviously, depreciation is key. And when I say missing data, this is the stuff you need to know. Depreciation is a powerful system you need to master. Most exotics and luxury cars pretty much lose the bulk of their value, as you saw in the first 3 to 4 years. 3 years, the majority, 4 to 5, a little bit less, but in most cases after 5, you're pretty much depleted. Again, just like the watch system, this supply and demand plays a significant role in not only depreciation, but in terms of the actual cost of purchase. Also, every time leases come down after 24, 36, and 48 months, you're going to see a huge drop in prices on cars simply because, again, supply and demand, right? More supply floods the used car market, less demand. Therefore, prices go down a shit. Dealer incentives always impact models. So think about this way. If a dealer is selling a car for $38,000 new, suddenly offers, you just bought that car, and in 6 months you hear that they offer now $6,000 rebate plus 0% financing, your car just became worth $10,000 less just because the dealer had that promotion. Even though your car is exactly the same car, but now nobody wants your car because they can get that deal at the dealer for a brand new car. So again, this is stuff you need to know and you need to understand in order to move forward. For the first time in business, we're looking at depreciation as a good thing in this business. We're not looking at it as a bad thing. Consider that any time depreciation takes place here in the car industry, you win. So cars that depreciate more so because of their, just their marquee or the way they're considered, or maybe they have issues during the first years, are good for you, not bad. You just want to make sure you're not that sucker that bought it new. Here we're looking at the depreciation on a brand new LP550. Now, where do I get these numbers from? I get these numbers from Lamborghini. I have a lot of friends in the business. And so when you lease a new Lamborghini, Lamborghini does its lease schedule for you, in terms of what the car is worth as you drive it. And so they have the, the lease trade-in value divided for themselves into further models. So it's really weird, but you'll see here it starts at $235 for a really nice LP550 Spider fully loaded. And after year 2, look at that, it goes to $147. You're talking $100K off. Most Lamborghini leases only allow 2,500 miles a year. So think about this. You're talking about 5,000 miles on a car, $100K off. And then if you look at year 3, it goes down a little bit less, right? And then year 4, even a little bit less. And then look at what happens in year 5. It goes back up. Why? Because everything hits a threshold where it doesn't move. So our goal in this business and our goal in this system is to go ahead and get the car anywhere here around the 142 mark, right? Or capture it all the way here at the 138 mark. If we're doing a short run, then we want the latest, hottest car. We want to be around here, and we want to sell it between 3 and 4 years of age, you see? But even if we keep it because we can't sell it, we're not going back up in value as long as we don't drive it. Many of you may not be able to afford to keep a $150K car in the garage for 2 years, but the beauty of it here is that even if you did, you're not really losing more money than you did if you kept it 1, unless you're putting a lot of miles on it. So if you consider the 142K mark here, if you're short-term, that's when you want to buy the car. If you're long-term, then you want to go ahead and pick it up later. And either you can do a good flip on after 5 years of age, or you can go ahead and purchase it, drive it for a while, and never really worry about it. You see, you're expected to accumulate 2,500 miles a year. So, or let's say up to 4,000 a year. So if you're looking at 5 years, even at 2,500, right, you're looking at roughly 10 to 15,000 miles. If I can show you how to find an LP550 for 140,000, but after it's 5 years of age, right, but it only has 2,000 miles, then guess what? You now have 8,000 miles of allowance that you can drive this car up for yourself before it's worth, again, it's 138. Because technically, even though it's worth probably 145, 146 because of the mileage, you're still buying it at 138 using some of these strategies I'm going to show you. And then you're ultimately able to drive it up to the mileage allowance and then get rid of it for really what it's worth, because someone else will pay that because they don't know about this system. So here we're going to look at the depreciation on a Mercedes-Benz CLS 63 AMG according to Mercedes USA. The car MSRP is at 105. That is rounded off. Year 2 depreciation, you're talking about $87,000 for the car. Year 3, 65, and look at what happens on year 4, $44,000. You're talking about 40% of the value after 4 years. And then again, year 5, 38,000. So look at this, like this is incredible. In 5 years, right? In 5 years, the car is worth a third of what it was new. So if you consider that you had a loan on this car, assume that you bought it new, and you wanted to get rid of it before 5 years, look at the loss you're taking here. So what if you bought it here? Or what if you bought it here? And so you didn't have to take on this curve, right? That's what I'm going to teach you. And so here you can look again at the depreciation over 5 years, significant loss. This is different. I wanted you to see the difference between an exotic and a non-exotic. All right, so let's look at MyWay versus leasing. And first, let's break down the leasing protocols themselves. So for those of you who don't understand what leasing is leasing is when you take a car that you otherwise wouldn't be able to afford, for example, and you rent it for the long term. What does that mean? So let's assume a Range Rover costs $70,000. We looked at the depreciation schedule and saw that after 3 years, that Range Rover would be worth $35,000. So if that holds true, and these are just examples, I'm not basing that on any actual facts, then the $35K difference, which would be 50% of the price, is ultimately what you need to break down over 36 months, which is your lease term, and that gives you your payment. Because you're not financing a car that you hope to pay back in full, what ends up happening is after 3 years, you have the opportunity at that point to go ahead and look into either purchasing the car you're still in and say, hey, I want to continue making payments, so I want to refinance it now and it's worth less. Or at that point, you can just give the keys back to the dealer and say, you sell it, I don't really care to do anything with it. I just want a different car, and you walk out of it. The advantages there in terms of leasing is you're going to be looking at a few things. So the advantages are you're going to be able to take off the full lease payment as a write-off. Because it's usage of the car, it's not so much based on a payment to own a car. You can actually write that off, especially if you own a business. So there's value in that as well. So don't really consider that. Now we're going to look at an example here on what a lease on a Lamborghini LP550 brand new 2013 for 3 years it looks like. So the MSRP on the car is $235,000 out of pocket. So the actual car was an LP550 13 Spider. It had the couture stitching option, the carbon fiber interior, it had the carbon fiber steering wheel, the E-gear, and it had, upgraded wheels, and it was a very well-loaded car. Now, what happens to the car, despite being worth $235,000, like we looked at earlier on our depreciation card, right? With the car itself, because it's new, right? You can't really lease used cars. So, loss of $95,000 on the car alone in 3 years, meaning that the car now is going to depreciate almost $95,000 in 3 years. Now, what does that mean? What does that exactly entail, right? Like, what is the $95,000? Is that, do you care since you don't own the car? Well, of course, because you're going to be paying for that. That's part of the issue here. The other issue is you're going to also be faced with higher insurance because the total value of the car is not just $95,000, it's the $235,000. If we look at the kind of payment you'll be making, you'll be putting $60,000 down if you want to do a large down payment for a reasonable $1,600 a month. So you're losing $60,000 out of pocket and then still must make the $1,600 a month. You would be looking somewhere at $4,000 if you put very close to nothing down. So again, this is a lot of money to go into a car, and you're not getting any of that back. But what you are getting back is the tax write-off, on that payment. So that's definitely helpful. The one benefit here, though, is you have a brand new car, and obviously all the warranty covers everything. So there's absolutely no worries at all that something could go wrong in that sense. So definitely not a bad scenario, just a scenario that makes you lose a total of $95,000 on the car loan, not even on the maintenance or anything else occurring, just on the car loan within 3 years. Now let's compare the same thing with MyWay. So let's look at the same car with less than 10,000 miles, without warranty, but built in 2010. We're talking about the same exact look. Now the big difference is, let me be very transparent here because someone's going to call me out on this. The difference is we're looking at the LP560. What is the big difference? It's all-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive. So is it a big deal? I would say it is to someone who races cars. I wouldn't say it is to someone like an ordinary person who's out there to just purchase a car, enjoy it for a little bit, and then move on to another car. They look dead on identical. The LP560 is a little bit heavier and drives slower, but nonetheless an equally powerful car and beautiful car. I personally also prefer the 550, but not in a way that would keep me, based on what I'm about to show you, on buying this car instead. So built in 2010, 10,000 miles, so it's 3 years older, someone gave up this lease. Same look, different years. Now you can purchase that car. Remember, I showed you that depreciation schedule and what happens after 3 years, right? Why does that happen on this car? Because one, it's out of warranty. 2 years unlimited mileage on Lamborghinis. But guess what? It's past the 2 years, so it drops. What else is going on with this particular car that's made it drop? It took its depreciation schedule and volume came back, right? Leases were up 2 years, 3 years after. This car is now available in volume. Even though you might only see 10 available online, well, that's volume for Lamborghini. So it's different, but yet again, it still holds true. So we can purchase this car roughly at about $140,000, right? Which is, that's pretty decent, I would say. So additionally, let's even assume in this case that we have $10,000 in repair or maintenance. And let's just assume that, right? That our buy price can be $140,000, and then we're gonna add an additional $10,000 in repairs or maintenance. The total cost of ownership now is $15,000 for 3 years. So how do we come to that number? So we have the $140,000 purchase price, and we're gonna resell this car at $135,000. Okay. Now, assuming that, here's the beauty of it. Remember what I showed you on the depreciation graph? It doesn't really depreciate anymore once it reaches a point. So this car will never be worth like $85,000. As of right now, unless another decade passes by, this car is going to hold between the 130 to 150 mark, depending on miles and condition and everything else. So even if we take, now, you don't have to have $10,000 in repairs or maintenance. That doesn't make any sense, right? But, I've never had any repairs that were 10 grand. Is it possible? Of course, I've had friends that have had repairs that were 50 grand because they didn't do their homework. But think about this, the $10,000 in repair and maintenance is even additional. It's not even guaranteed you'll incur that. The loss of the $5,000 here, right? It plus the $10,000 equals $15,000. Assuming you keep the car 3 years, right? And you actually want to enjoy it, you're talking less than $500 a month for a car that costs $250,000. Tax write-off on the car itself and sale at a loss creates additional write-off. So let's kind of pause and see what that means. Tax write-off on the car itself. Well, you're going to write off the car as an actual asset for the business instead of business use. So you're going to be able to deduct the value of the car divided by 5 years. So that'll give you a yearly depreciation schedule. And then when you sell the car, you're going to show that you had a $5,000 loss because it only assumes what the purchase price was and what the sale price was, not what the depreciated amount is. Once you go actually trade that car in to a dealer, or at that point try to sell it, you run it through a dealer and you get a tax credit so that the tax is already paid. You don't have to pay tax anymore. If you account the write-offs, and if you account all of these things, and assuming the $10,000 repairs, your total true cost of ownership was free. Now, because you could have spent less, you could have even made money, or you could have maybe sold it for less and ended up, not having any expenses or vice versa. But let's assume even the worst. How many people would actually pay $500 a month to have a $250,000 Lamborghini Spider? So that by itself, I think, should be good enough in order to understand why this system just makes more sense than something else in terms of leasing or buying.